Hey guys, Autistic Guy with a Camera here. When I reviewed Volume 1 of Planet Ripple, I knew right away it was going to be popular. Apparently, it's the only review of it on YouTube besides the one I was inspired by, the Autistic Critic, or Shoulder Spirit Reviews, as he's also known. Check out his channel, his reviews are really fun and goofy. But now I'm going to finally review Volume 2 of Planet Ripple and see how the plot progresses from here. Now let's dive into the review. Yes, I know it's a lame joke. Let's begin. Number 1. The plot line. The story takes place about a few weeks after the event of Volume 1, and Minnow is situated on the aircraft carrier Pristidae, Honora Hakes' ship. It opens with Captain Nathaniel Rudd talking with Dr. Weaver about how he feels bad about how Minnow's been mistreated all throughout her time on the Ballina, because he says he just wasn't quite ready to be captain and wasn't exactly up to the job of commanding a ship so big with so many people on it, and didn't really have the time to understand Minnow's condition. This kind of explains a bit as to how Minnow's abuse kind of fell out of sight for so long. She just kind of fell through the cracks and eventually just ended up being ignored. It's really sad. We're then introduced to new characters once the story shifts to the Pristidae, and I'll get to them in a bit. In the story, Minnow's quality of life has improved considerably thanks to her new limbs, better living conditions, and better food, and so on. It's fun seeing her so happy and healthy now, especially considering how her new limbs are more usable than her old, beat-up ones were in Volume 1. She's demonstrating the Dauphin, the mech she got at the end of Volume 1, and we get some neat insight into how the mech works. It's technically non-lethal, but can still incapacitate enemies, with a variety of functions including these electrified nets, capture foam that expands on contact with air, kind of like that stuff from The Incredibles, and it has other functions you see later on in the story, like creating plasma from gas emitted from exhaust vents heating up on the palms. However, during a demonstration of its underwater capabilities, the lights go out and Minnow is now trapped underwater in a metal suit in the dark, which is exactly what happened when Andrea died in front of her eyes, triggering her PTSD that we saw a little of in Volume 1 when she saw the same mech model that Andrea died in. It's a nice elaboration on that, and some interesting character consistency given all she's been through, but it also messes up the demonstration, which leads to Honora yelling at her after she accidentally blurts out something Honora told her about Admiral Sturgeon's involvement in the death of Honora's brother, Jeremy. He apparently been captured and brainwashed by the pirates and killed several people on board the ship before Sturgeon had to take him down. Interestingly, blurting out stuff like that is very in line with how autistic people talk, and is kind of relatable to myself personally on one or two occasions I can remember. Kind of makes me feel bad for Minnow. Yeah. Honora yelling at Minnow really upsets her. But after that, Honora learns from from Rudd that Minnow almost drowned after Andrea died, so she wasn't just scared of the dark when she freaked out during the demonstration. It was part she learned about her PTSD. It also shows that Honora does care about Minnow when she apologizes for pushing her too hard. And throughout the volume, you see her grow a little friendlier with Minnow as it goes on. We also learn that Noma was the one who gave Honora that little woven green outfit that she gave when she wore in Volume 1, and told her about Minnow to give her a chance to improve her quality of life. It's kind of interesting to follow up on that. We even get to see Minnow do some awesome stuff with the Dauphin during her battle against the pirate commander, but that's enough for now. I don't want to recap the whole plotline here. That would take a little too long, and I instead say you should buy the book to get a good idea of how it goes down rather than listening to my half-assed recap of it. For now, let's get on to the good part, or next part of the review. Number 2, the new characters. I'll focus on the new characters in this part, as there are at least 3 of them to elaborate on. Let's start with Minnow's new friend, Donnie. She's an engineer on board the Pristidae who apparently had a friend who wanted her to be a model, but she didn't really want to go into that line of work. She wanted to help people, so she went into engineering to work on cyborgs, since engineers are basically cyborg doctors. Apparently her home ship was attacked by pirates and her family was killed. Nobody on the next ship knew her, and she didn't get along with them very well, except for her aforementioned model friend. She also has 3 prosthetic fingers from an accident at work, and since cyborgs aren't desired in modeling, she couldn't be a model even if she wanted to now. Like Minnow, she's also autistic, although it's a higher functioning type that isn't as obvious to some people. And this is really well done. Too many stories show just one type of autism with fictional characters, and people assume that that's it. But with Donnie, you can tell by the way she interacts with Minnow and some of the others that she has autism before it's confirmed in dialogue. Show, don't tell, you know. She is also very sweet, like when Minnow was rescued by Honora, she helps her out of the Dauphin and she hugs her. It's just adorable. And she's such a neat new character for Minnow to interact with. I'd love to see more of her in the future. The other new character is Johanna Sturgeon, an admiral in the Navy. He's kind of intense and pretty imposing, but he definitely cares for the people under his command. To me, it looked kind of like he had some kind of cyborg augmentation on his jawbone, but it's kind of hard to tell. I also liked how he didn't resent Honora for holding a grudge against him for his involvement in her brother's death, but rather felt annoyed at her for telling Minnow that it was all his fault Jeremy died. He's pretty understanding, partially because he mentions that one of his kids also has autism, but a little lower functioning. And he feels kind of protective of Minnow since she reminds him of his second eldest son. Especially neat since in the Planet Ripple universe, the word autism is never mentioned by name, as one of the many bits and pieces of information lost over the thousands of years that Earth has been flooded. It's another mystery to people. It's kind of a cool angle there. But I also like how he doesn't think the Dauphin is a viable, defensible weapon, but he isn't unreasonable or condescending about it, but rather brings up some concerns about its ability to function in battle, since it's armed with non-lethal capture foam and other tools like that to capture and rehabilitate Barracuda pirates, seeing as apparently most of them were captured and forced to join. See? He instead didn't really see it as a viable defensive tool because of that. And interestingly, he's not wrong. But he does eventually come to see that that the Dauphin is a viable defensive tool in the hands of the right pilot. But his concern about the use of tools like that is pretty realistic to how real-life military people would think, and it's kind of cool to see that portrayed here. As somebody who admires our military, it's neat to see more positive portrayals of them, even if it is a fictional version of the Navy in the far future. I kind of hope we see more of them soon. We now get to the Barracuda Gang. The only one named besides the commander is Felix Hutchins, one of the guys who stole the speedboat and got captured in Volume 1. It's kind of cool to get some follow-up on that, especially since Noma becomes convinced that her brother Nulk is now one of the pirates since he was captured last volume. It makes sense, because in the previous volume we had Hack kidnapping people and sending them off to other ships and things. We don't see Hack or Barracuda this volume, but we do see this one guy with giant claws whose name isn't mentioned, who was later defeated by Minnow. And we also see one of the commanders Nulk mentioned last volume, and his name is Lubor Resnick, aka the Butcher. Man, this guy was neat. As one of the more fanatical pirates who gave up their flesh in service to Barracuda, as Nulk mentioned last volume, he's not much more than a head and some vital organs like Metalbeard from the Lego movie, but nowhere near as goofy as that guy. His body is mostly this giant crab mech with a diamond dome to protect his head, and his armaments are powerful enough to nearly sink the Peristidae all by himself, since it broke the runway off the front, and, at least from the look of it, pushed it down a few feet where it bobbed back up like a toy boat in a bathtub. Apparently he used to be higher ranking than he is now, but after several mistakes on his part, Queen Barracuda doesn't like him much anymore. While he's still high-ranking, she doesn't really call him to meetings much anymore, and he's one of the more likely commanders to lose his position. His modus operandi is usually to attack ships with wealthy people on board, kidnap them to use their wealth and power for the pirates, and use them to finance them, which is how he comes in, since a lot of the people coming from Minno's demonstration of the Dauphin were investors to finance the building of more mechs like it. Lubor is a pretty cool character, and his arrogant attitude, unlike some other characters, can be backed up, since his battle zoot, Schlagen, is basically a giant weapons platform / tank on legs, with this giant diamond dome. And his battle with Minnow is one of the most epic parts in the book, which leads to Minnow calling out his talk about dedication to the pirate cause, since he just came out here to enrich himself and set himself up for another pratfall. Out of the pirates we've seen so far, he's one of the most badass, despite his cocky attitude, and I can't wait to see more of him in future volumes. Number 3. The ending. I'm not going to give away that much of the ending here, but I will say it's very sweet. It elaborates on Captain Rudd and how he feels regarding Minnow and how she is progressing, and even helps Minnow's guilt over Andrea with a very well-written affirmation of how she's grown and how he believes that she can do amazing things. It's so sweet. Minnow cries and even forgives Rudd for his lack of action while she was being mistreated on the Ballina. It even shows us a better view of the Shallows, the dolphin merpeople's home, which we saw a little of last volume, but now we see it in better detail, and it's neat. The fact that they live in these little huts, possibly carved out of some kind of underwater rock, reminds me of in Bionicle, how the Matoran lived in these little similarly shaped carved out huts like stone igloos or something. Like Kokoro and Pokoro and a couple of other areas. And given that the author is a big Bionicle fan like me, it's not too surprising that he would use that kind of imagery like that. It's really cool. That being said, this was an awesome continuation of an epic comic, and with the teaser for Volume 3 foreshadowing some more character development for Minnow, I can't wait to see what happens next. I highly recommend this if you've read Volume 1, and I can't wait to see where Minnow goes next volume. This is Autistic Guy with a Camera, signing off.